The wave hit Avra from the left and she lost the boy. One moment his small fist was locked around her wrist, and the next the sea had made its decision, and she was tumbling through dark water that tasted like iron and cold, and the end of something she had not yet named. She could not see the bottom. She could not see the surface. The current between the two sea stacks was a living thing, violent and impersonal, and it dragged her sideways against granite that stripped the skin from her left shoulder in a single long scrape. She hit the submerged ledge feet first. The impact knocked the last air from her lungs, but it stopped the tumble. She got a boot against the rock, pushed, and broke the surface 4 feet to the right of where she'd gone under. The boy was already gone. She could hear shouting from the upper cliff, the Thornhaven escort, finally reacting, 3 seconds too late as always, and she turned just in time to see small arms being pulled from the water, small lungs screaming. He was alive. She had pushed him toward the rock shelf just before the wave took her. Good, she thought, and then the second wave came in, and she stopped thinking entirely. She woke to the smell of pine smoke and salt and her own blood. The ceiling above her was stone, low and curved, the kind of ceiling that had been carved rather than built. Firelight moved across it in slow, amber arcs. She was on a cot, rough wool blankets, the kind of warmth that comes from outside rather than from within. Someone else's heat, seeping into her from the left side, like a furnace positioned too close. Avra turned her head. He was sitting in a chair that was too small for him, which was the first thing she noticed. The second thing was that he was watching her, the way you watch something you are not entirely sure is safe. Not hostile, not warm either. Just careful, measuring. He was large the way cliff faces are large, something built by force over time, not designed for comfort. Dark hair, close-cropped with the kind of jaw that suggested a razor was a low priority most weeks. Scars along the left side of his neck, silver-white and old. His eyes, catching the firelight, were pale grey, and they had not moved from her face. "The boy," Avra said. "Alive." His voice was low. His escort pulled him out. "The Thornhaven delegation left the cliffs an hour after you went under. They assumed you were dead." She registered this without surprise. She had been assumed dead, or close to it, by the Thornhaven pack in one form or another for most of her 24 years. "Where am I?" "Ironcliff territory. My wolf found you on the lower rocks at first light." A pause. "I am Falk, Alpha of the Ironcliff pack." She had heard of the Ironcliff Alpha. Everyone had. The pack held the sea cliffs from the northern cape to the Ashvale border, an enormous stretch of contested coastline, and the wolf who held it was reputed to be as unyielding as the granite he ruled. There was also the other thing packs whispered about when they thought no one important was listening, that his fated mate had broken the bond 3 years ago, had chosen wealth and a southern alliance over the pull that wolves were supposed to die rather than surrender. He did not look broken. He looked like a man who had decided that breaking was for other people. "I'm Avra," she said, "Thornhaven pack, records archive." Something moved across his face, too fast to read, there and gone. A records clerk. "Archivist," she said, "there's a difference." She stayed because her left leg was fractured below the knee. Her shoulder required 3 stitches that the Ironcliff healer, a reed-thin woman named Sune, who had the bedside manner of a tax collector, put in without ceremony or apology, and the storm that had taken her off the cliff edge was still hammering the coast 3 days later. She did not ask for anything. This was a habit so old she had stopped noticing it, the same way you stop noticing the sound of a clock after you've lived with it long enough. Thornhaven had a way of teaching its wolfless members that need was a kind of debt, and debt accumulated interest. Soon brought her broth and clean wrappings without being asked. The beta, a scarred, wiry man named Phelan, who moved like someone whose ribs had been broken enough times that the habit was structural, brought her a crutch on the second day and told her without preamble that the library was 2 doors left and she was allowed in it. Falk himself appeared at her door each morning, stood in the frame for approximately 10 seconds, and asked if she needed anything. She always said no. He always left the tray he was holding on the table in the corridor. It was on the 5th morning that she made it as far as the Great Hall. She hadn't meant to stop at the shield wall. She'd been aiming for the narrow window at the hall's far end where the sea was visible on clear days, and her leg had been cooperating until she drew level with the collection of mounted relics along the north wall. Old weapons, pack sigils, a dented war helm with a crack through the cheekpiece. And then below these, a round shield, black iron rim, dark grey face, a single etched marking in the center she didn't recognize. She touched it. The vision hit her like a door swinging open into darkness. 3 figures moving through a gate she recognized as the fortress's eastern entrance. Midnight, no moon. They carried tools with long iron handles. Not weapons, prying instruments. They were moving toward the lower corridor, the one that ran beneath the Alpha's private quarters. She could smell them even in the vision, chemical and bitter, like something synthesized, the specific reek of enhanced wolves, council operatives. She saw the date on a discarded wrapper one of them had dropped. 3 days from now. She saw the route they took. She saw which guard post would be unmanned. The vision broke apart like fog, and she was back in the Great Hall, gripping the shield with both hands and breathing too fast. How long has that been happening? She turned. Falk was standing at the far end of the hall. She had not heard him come in. The visions. She was too shaken for pretense, as long as I can remember, when I touch things that matter to someone, objects with history. He crossed the hall slowly, with the deliberateness she had already come to recognize, the way he moved whenever he was deciding something. "What did you see?" she told him. He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes gone very still. "You expect me to believe?" "No," she said. "I expect you to investigate, because the alternative is finding out in 3 days whether I'm telling the truth." Another silence, then Phelan. The beta materialized from a corridor as if he'd been waiting, which he probably had. He looked at Avra with an expression she couldn't fully interpret, not distrust, something more complex, the look of a man recalibrating a calculation he'd thought was settled. "Already heard," Phelan said. "Eastern Gate. 3 nights out. I'll put eyes on it." She did not say, "I told you so." She uncurled her fingers from the shield's edge and stepped back. Falk's gaze tracked her the entire time. It was Soon who found the binding. She discovered it during a standard examination that was supposed to be about Avra's shoulder, and she went very quiet in the way healers go quiet when something is wrong that they had not expected. Then she said, without inflection, "There's a working inside you. Old magic, pack craft." Avra did not react. "Someone bound your wolf," Sune continued, "deliberately. This isn't suppression from wolflessness. This is a lock, a pause, a very old, very deliberate lock." "I know," Avra said. The healer looked up at her. "You know." "I've always known something was there." She pressed her fingers to her sternum. Where other shifters carried the easy, warm presence of their wolves, Avra carried a stillness that had the particular quality of silence in a room where someone has just stopped speaking. "Not empty," interrupted. "I just didn't know who did it." The answer came 3 hours later from a direction Avra had not expected. The elder's name was Torith, a heavy-shouldered man in his late 60s who served as Thornhaven's ceremonial head and unofficial record-keeper. He appeared at the fortress gate that afternoon with 2 Thornhaven escorts and the expression of a man who had been carrying something so long he had forgotten what it felt like to put it down. He had not come for Avra. He had come because the delegation's young archivist had not returned, and Thornhaven's Alpha had eventually noticed, but when he saw Avra in the corridor, upright, moving, alive, something in his face cracked along a seam that had been under strain for 20 years. He told her in the small receiving room off the main hall, with Falke standing near the window because Avra had not asked him to leave, and he had not pretended to have somewhere else to be. Her mother had been an oracle, the last of a bloodline that Thornhaven's previous alpha had declared dangerous and reported to the regional council's record purge. Her mother had fled, had come to Thornhaven territory pregnant and dying, had begged the pack to keep the child safe, and had died in the healer's wing 3 days after Avra was born. Torith had done the binding himself when Avra was 6 years old, when the oracle gift had first manifested. Small at first, just the visions, just her hands finding truth in objects the way water finds cracks in stone, and he had known that if it fully emerged, the council would come. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. Avra looked at him, at his shaking hands, at the specific weariness of a man who had made an impossible choice and spent 2 decades discovering that the choice had not, in fact, been the right one. "You kept me invisible," she said. "You kept me nothing." Yes, he did not argue, I did. The absence of excuse undid her, just a little. In the window, Falk had gone very still. Inara arrived on the 7th day. She came with the southern delegation, her new mate's pack, the Gildenreach wolves, wealthy and well-armored and very pleased with themselves. She was tall, beautiful in the way things built for display are beautiful, clean angles and careful construction. She wore deep green and she smelled like cedar and something floral that didn't quite mask the sharper scent underneath. The one that Avra had learned from years in Thornhaven's records hall meant someone was performing confidence they didn't fully feel. She found Avra in the library and sat across from her without invitation. "You're the Thornhaven stray," she said. "Archivist," Avra said. She did not look up from the map she was tracing. "You should know," Inara continued, "that whatever you think is happening here, Falk doesn't form attachments. It isn't in him. 3 years ago, I thought it was. I was wrong." Her voice was level, practiced. "He'll find you useful for a while, because you're something new, and then he'll remember that new things stop being new." Avra set down the map, looked at her. Inara's jaw was set, her shoulders precisely controlled, and her hands, where they rested on the table's edge, had the white-knuckled look of someone gripping a ledge. She had not stopped loving him. Whatever the Gildenreach Alliance had offered, it had not fixed the original problem. It had just added another layer on top of it. "I'm not trying to take anything from you," Avra said. "There's nothing to take. Then you have nothing to worry about." Inara stood. Her expression was controlled. Everything about her was controlled. But at the door she paused. "He doesn't believe in the bond anymore. I made sure of that. A beat. Keep it in mind." She left. Avra sat in the silence and thought about things that cannot be unfixed. The 3rd night arrived. Phelan had 6 wolves stationed along the eastern corridor, invisible to anyone approaching through the gate. Avra had described the route exactly: the unmanned guard post on the 2nd landing, the loose stone in the eastern wall that someone had already used as a handhold. Phelan had verified the loose stone himself and then looked at her for a long time and not said anything that could be called gratitude, but conveyed it anyway. She heard the eastern gate open at midnight. She heard Phelan's signal 2 low notes and then the sounds of a very short, very decisive confrontation. 3 enhanced wolves against 6 Ironcliff warriors who had known exactly where and when. It was not close. Falk appeared from the upper corridor when it was over. He looked at the 3 operatives on their knees, and then at Avra, sitting against the armory door with her fractured legs stretched in front of her. "What are you doing out here?" "Couldn't sleep," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. In the torchlight, his eyes had gone a dark, flat shade she had come to recognize as the expression he wore when something had gotten past his defenses without permission. "The council will send more," he said. "I know. When they find out what your bloodline is, they'll treat it as a standing threat. I know that too." He crossed the corridor in several long strides and lowered himself to the floor beside her, which was not something she had expected him to do. He was too large for sitting on floors. He looked slightly ridiculous, which was the first thing about him that had seemed genuinely, ordinarily human. "The bond," he said without preamble. "I need you to know that He stopped. "Tried again 3 years ago. I would have told you the bond was the only thing that mattered, that it was irrevocable, that it made everything simpler." His jaw was tight. "I was wrong, or I was right, and the simplification was not in my favor." He looked at his hands. "I stopped trusting it." "I know," Avra said. "I can feel it between us. I've felt it since the cliff." "So have I." The admission cost him something. She could see it in the line of his shoulders, the particular way he was holding himself very still, in the way that large things hold still when they are trying not to show how close they are to moving. "I am not good at this," he said. "In case that wasn't apparent." Avra almost smiled, I noticed. "Phelan says I have the interpersonal instincts of a battering ram." She did smile at that, just briefly, just a flicker, and his eyes tracked it the way people track things that are rare. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I know you never do." A pause. "That isn't a virtue, it's a wound." She was quiet. He was right, and it wasn't the kind of right she was accustomed to hearing from someone who had known her for 7 days. "The binding is failing," she said. "Soon thinks the proximity is weakening it. Whatever is in me, it's been responding." She pressed her fingers to her chest. Beneath her palm something moved, not a flicker, a slow, deep turning, like something waking in deep water. She says it could break any time. When it does, I don't know what comes out. The old accounts say oracles could project, make others see what they see. He considered this. The council will call that a threat. Everyone will call that a threat. "Not everyone," he said it simply, not as reassurance as fact. "Let me know when it happens. You might not be able to help." "Then I'll be there anyway." He glanced at her. The offer stood in the space between them, plainly stated, no conditions attached. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She sat beside him on the corridor floor with her legs stretched out and the armory door warm at her back, and she did not pull away from the heat he radiated without seeming to notice it. And that was its own kind of answer. The binding broke 4 nights later. It went fast, the way structures go when the load is finally too much. Not a gradual failing, but a sudden, total release. Avra was at the library table when it happened. First came a sound, low and resonant, somewhere below hearing but absolutely felt, like a bell struck inside her chest. Then heat, sharp and spreading, and the stillness behind her sternum came apart at every seam at once. What came up from beneath it was not small. The wolf was old, not in years, she had no word for what she meant by old, but in depth. A presence with weight behind it, patience behind it, something that had been waiting inside her with a thoroughness that made 24 years feel like an afternoon. The light came through her skin. She had not expected light. The histories Torith had left her, offered like a penance, 3 volumes of oracle records that Thornhaven had hidden in a basement archive for 2 decades, had described the oracle gift as vision, projection. Not this silver-white radiance that filled the library from her hands outward, spilling under the door, moving through the fortress walls the way water moves through old stone. Every wolf in the fortress felt it. She knew because she felt them, not their thoughts, but their truth, the specific weight of every life the oracle light was touching, every wound carried quietly, every hope stored in the dark because the light had never been safe before. The council's second strike team, 12 enhanced wolves already inside the outer wall, stopped moving. She could feel them too, the chemical fog in their systems, the suppressants, the wolves underneath clawing at the modifications like animals at a locked gate, and the oracle light moved through them the same way it moved through everything else, without discrimination, without condition. The modifications began to unravel. She felt their wolves come back, not like a switch thrown, but like a tide returning, slow and enormous and unstoppable. The operatives were on their knees before the light had fully passed them, not in pain, in something closer to relief. Avra was dimly aware of Falk standing in the doorway. She was more aware of the wolf inside her that had just discovered it was not actually small, and of the very specific challenge of not burning the library down. "Breathe," Falk said. She breathed. The light contracted. Slowly, over the space of several minutes, it pulled back into her, folded down, settled into something she suspected she was going to have to learn to carry the way you learn to carry something with more heft than expected, but fits naturally in the hands. She looked at Falk. He was looking back at her with an expression that was not fear, not awe exactly, though it had that quality. It was the expression of a man who has been arguing with himself about something for 2 weeks, and has just, finally, stopped. "The strike team," she said. "Phelan has them." A pause. "Their wolves are back, every modification, gone." He crossed the room, his voice was steady. His hands were not. She could see them clenched at his sides, the knuckles pale against the firelight. "Avra, I don't know how to control it yet." "That's not what I was going to say." He stopped in front of her, close enough that the warmth coming off him met the warmth coming off her, and neither pulled back. "I have spent 3 years telling myself the bond is a chemical accident, that the last time I trusted it, I made myself into something that could be abandoned, and the only way to prevent that from happening again was to stop trusting it entirely." He held her gaze. "I was wrong, not about what happened. What happened was real. But I was wrong about the conclusion." He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "I can feel your wolf right now from here. She feels like standing at the edge of the cliffs on a clear morning, like something vast and cold and entirely indifferent to whether I find it frightening." "She is," Avra said, a little. Something shifted in his face, the first real warmth she had seen there. Not careful, not measured, arriving from a place he hadn't been guarding. "Then we're well matched," he said, "because my wolf is largely the same." Inara was escorted from Ironcliff territory the following morning. She had sent a message to the council, a secondary communication discovered in the outgoing records Falke's people reviewed after the strike team confirmed where their orders had come from. She had not done it out of cruelty. She had done it out of fear, which was worse in some ways and more understandable in others. Falk gave her a choice: formal exile, or she could walk out voluntarily and never return. She chose to walk. At the gate, her eyes moved to Avra, one long, measuring look, and in it Avra saw the same thing she had seen in the library. Not hatred, something rawer and more private. A woman confronting the fact that the thing she had traded away was not replaceable. Avra did not look away. Torith was removed from the Thornhaven Elder's seat. This was not Falke's decision to make, and he said so plainly. It was a communication sent to the Thornhaven Alpha, together with a full account of the Oracle binding and its effects over 2 decades. What happened after was Thornhaven's matter. What was not Thornhaven's matter was the Oracle, who had been kept inside their borders for 24 years and had never once been given her real name in their records. Phelan submitted a formal request to the regional archives the following day, correcting 3 historical entries. Avra stood in the doorway of the records room and watched him do it. The look on his face was that of a man performing a task that was overdue and inarguably right, which she had come to understand was Phelan's expression for most things he actually cared about. The marking ceremony happened at dawn, on the flat cliff face above the northern sea gate, where the wind came off the water cold and salted, and the sky was the particular pale grey of early light before the colour had fully decided what it was going to be. Falke's pack formed a circle on the cliff, close to 200 wolves in human form, their breath rising in slow white columns in the cold morning air. The sea moved below the edge, dark and constant, and the sound it made was like a low, rhythmic percussion that had existed before the fortress and would exist long after. Avra wore grey because grey was what she had, and because it matched the sea and the stone and the wolf inside her chest, who was wide awake and watching everything with an interest that felt, at intervals, like mild judgment. "Avra," Falk said, and his voice carried to every edge of the cliff, "I claim you as my mate, my Luna, my equal, not by right of birth, not by bond alone, by choice mine and yours, freely made and clearly stated. Before my pack and the sea and whatever is listening," he tilted his head, baring his throat, the most unyielding alpha on the coast, offering the most vulnerable point of his body to a woman who had arrived on his rocks with a broken leg and no pack to her name. She put her hand there first, felt his pulse under her fingers, fast, she noted, faster than his face gave away, and the oracle wolf rose in her chest and sent a warmth through her palm that was not a vision but a recognition. This is what the weight of it was always meant to stand beside. Then she tilted her own head and he bit down, and the mark was sharp and immediate, and then it was something else entirely, a warmth spreading outward from the sight, like light through water, reaching everything, and the bond between them locked into its final form. Not like a door closing, like the last piece of something, fitting into the exact space that had always been its shape. She bit him back. He tasted like salt and cold stone, and the sea in autumn, and the particular warmth of something that has stopped waiting. The silver-grey mark she left on his throat glowed briefly and settled. His wolf howled. Her wolf answered. The sound that rose from 200 throats was not a cheer. It was older than that, deeper. The sound a pack makes when something absent falls back into place. The sound that has no name except what it means, that the shape of things is finally right again, and everyone gathered on the cliff knew it, and the sea below carried it outward, and the pale grey morning received it and slowly, without ceremony, filled with light. In the weeks that followed, Avra learned the dimensions of what she carried. Sune developed a training protocol and delivered it with the same brisk efficiency she applied to everything, which helped. Phelan sourced every historical oracle text he could locate through the pack network, which was more than expected and less than needed, which was usual for ancient records. Falk gave her the armory, the actual armory, because the shield wall was where the visions were clearest and the room had good light, and he said, with the directness she was still getting accustomed to, that she might as well work where the work was. Wolves came to Ironcliff from other packs. Some had lost bonded mates to violence or forced separation. Some carried the residue of the Council's enhancement programs, suppressants and modifications that had dimmed what they were. They came because word traveled, and the word that traveled was specific. The Ironcliff Luna could see what was broken before it broke, could touch an object and tell you where your missing person had last been, could sit across from a wolf whose bond had been severed and find the loose end, and sometimes, with enough care, help them find their way back. She could not fix everything. She learned this early, and it cost her one bad night, and Falk sat with her through it, without saying the wrong thing, which is more difficult than it sounds and which she did not forget. Every morning, without exception, he left a cup of coffee outside the armory door before she woke. Black, because she had mentioned once that she took it black, and he had not forgotten. It was a small thing. She thought about it sometimes, the specific quality of being remembered in a small thing, by someone who didn't have to. And on clear mornings she would stand at the narrow cliff window with the cup in both hands and watch the sea go silver, as the sun came up over the eastern headland, and the wolf inside her would rise the light the way certain things do. Not with alarm, not with hunger, but with the simple, enormous ease of something that has found the particular air it was always built to breathe.